Hello and welcome. On behalf of the Australian Compassion Council, we welcome everyone to this panel discussion on compassion in leadership, the business case for compassion. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are present today. My name is Gwen Pennington. I am a member of the Australia Compassion Council, and we're part of the Global Charter for Compassion here in Australia. And it is a pleasure to be here with you today, sharing in this really important discussion. And I have the privilege of being joined here today by three incredibly compassionate leaders that I have a lot of respect for from across Australia. So the first person, Beck Bennett. Beck joins us from South Australia today. And Beck is the General Manager of Transformation and Portfolio Delivery at Data Action. Beck is a passionate executive who uses creative techniques to unlock the potential of people and businesses she works with. Beck has worked in large corporates, as well as small to medium-sized businesses, and single-handedly keeps the Post-it note business alive by running regular workshops with follow-up coaching and mentoring, ensuring she's continuously involved in the execution of ideas and can pivot quickly if required. One of Beck's taglines is, "Innovation doesn't happen in the boardroom. It happens on the factory floor," which reinforces her engagement and approach to be close to the people who undertake the real work in a business, getting unfiltered views and feedback on what is really going on. Welcome, Beck.
Thank you.
Craig Harding. Craig is the marketing director at Core Comms. Craig has been a director of Core Comms for the past 18 years. Core Comms is a boutique advertising, marketing, and public relations consultancy based in Tasmania, where Craig joins us today. Craig has extensive marketing and public relations Craig has extensive professional marketing experience and specializes in strategic communications planning and execution, working in the discipline for more than 28 years with international exposure based in London for 3 years. Craig has provided high-level advice and implemented campaigns across a variety of industries and sectors, including high-profile campaigns, particularly over the recent COVID crisis. Craig's management approach centers around making meaningful connections with people to guide, acknowledge, and support team members to achieve higher levels of performance and well-being in a safe and stimulating way. Welcome, Craig.
Morning, Gwen.
And we also have Clinton Goodwin, who's joining us from New South Wales in Australia today. Clinton is the Chief Operating Officer at Fujitsu General for Australia and New Zealand. Clinton is a socially conscious leader that inspires teams to deliver strategic outcomes through compassion, authenticity, commercial excellence, and most importantly, enlightening people to fulfill their true potential. Clinton has been with Fujitsu General for 7 years. Previously, he was a principal consultant, helping organizations from a broad range of industries improve everything from diversity and inclusion to legal matter effectiveness and profitability. Clinton's greatest reward is seeing growth in the people he works with. Clinton's received a master's in information systems management from the University of New South Wales and a postgraduate diploma in business from the University of Auckland, and is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Welcome, Clinton.
Thank you.
It's such a privilege to be here with each of you today. And I love knowing that you all are hardworking, passionate leaders who also focus on and bring compassion into your work. So let's just get right into the discussion. So I'd love to just hear very briefly a summary about your current leadership role in your organization at the moment from each of you. Just a quick overview in addition to the introduction. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. I'm an owner and director of the business, and we're a small boutique agency, so 12 staff in total. So while I have individual staff members, particularly in the marketing component of our business, because our business has 3 arms, publishing, public relations and marketing and advertising. So the focus that I have is on the marketing component of the business, and so I lead that business. And we have a very flat management structure. So we're very much at the coalface with our staff members, which I think is fantastic in terms of helping to build the relationships and the connections with our staff on a regular day-to-day basis. So that close working relationship with my staff is a fantastic way to really kind of build and engage with staff members and understand just small nuances of the work that they're doing, because we are so closely aligned.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Craig.
I can go next. So my role at Data Action. So Data Action is in the financial services sector. They're a technology company supporting core banking solutions. And I have about 25 to 30% of their headcount reporting to me across 6 teams. I often find myself in meetings with people that are a lot smarter than I am, technical people, developers who I have such rich knowledge and understanding about things that I have very, very limited knowledge about. And it's great to learn from them and to leverage off their knowledge and make sure that collectively we're making the right decisions for our clients. But the transformation portion of my role means that I connect with everybody across the business, seeking to help them with their learning and development, running Lean Six Sigma training courses, and helping them to solve their own problems by giving them the tools that they need.
That's great. Thanks, Beck. And Clinton.
Yeah. A bit like Craig. So we have a flat organisational structure. Our primary business is air conditioning. And I'm a member of the ANZ team, and I lead our supply chain, safety, sustainability and innovation functions across ANZ. I'm pretty fortunate. I get to, engage with different people across the company every day. And often that can be in many different forms. I'm also a mental health first aid officer. So it's quite a variety of, things that come across the desk every day.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Clinton. So as I mentioned earlier, I see each of you as leaders who really value and also practice compassion in the way you lead and in a business context. And we know that compassion is about acknowledging the suffering or the struggle or the stress that's going on, and also having a desire to alleviate that suffering. So I'm really interested in your business contexts and in your leadership. How do you integrate compassion into your leadership and your business?
Yeah, I'm happy to lead with that one. And I think I touched on it when I initially mentioned my role, but certainly building meaningful and strong connections with staff members is one of the ways that I integrate compassion into my role, because without those strong connections, really don't have understandings and insights into people's aspirations or issues they're facing. So, and similarly, providing safe platforms for two-way feedback to really understand and be authentic in our discussions on a regular basis, not just ticking boxes for a regular 3-monthly type of catch-up. It really is deep level discussions where I've exposed myself as a result of that. So being authentic and being vulnerable is very much part of that. And I think that then allows my staff members to also reciprocate, and then that helps to build those relationships over time, because we do make those deeper connections based on the openness that we have amongst each other. And I suppose sometimes it's awkward conversations as well. It's not always easy. So sometimes being brave and courageous with the conversations we have. And the easy route would be to not have those conversations, but having those conversations brings things to the fore that really need to be discussed. And I think at the end of the day, people are thankful for that they've been brought up and had those discussions. So I think those platforms of making a deeper connection and what that brings to the table is fundamentally important in having a compassionate approach to working with people.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Craig. And, as we know about compassion, it's about connecting us as humans as opposed to disconnecting us. So yeah, very important point. Thank you. Who else?
Yeah, I agree with Craig. I see my role as a leader to remove the obstacles that prevent our people from being successful. That's my job. I'm not there to do their job. I'm there to help them be really, really successful and deliver value for the organization. And to do that, to really understand what those obstacles are, it's about developing trust. And when you develop trust, it is about demonstrating that you can be trustworthy, and you can lose trust in an instant. So building those deep connections and deep relationships does involve sharing yourself, sharing your scars, demonstrating that you're not perfect, that on your leadership journey, you have failed and you have learned from that failure. And it's actually okay to fail if you fail forward, which is one of Data Action's organisational values that we strongly encourage, because that generates an openness to share those failures so that we can address them and we can learn from them and we can grow from them. It's when failures and mistakes are hidden and obstacles are hidden from executives that's where there are some really serious issues that can go undetected and can cause major problems down the track if we don't act on them really, really quickly. But if you haven't developed that trust and those deep connections with people, then you will never know. And I think that is a real impediment to business, for particularly where you have those elements.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Beck.
I think for me, on a personal note, I guess the formula is simple. Engaging the heart, being patient, being vulnerable, and listening and tending, but really asking excellent questions. And I try to instill that in the teams that I work in to really sort of share that knowledge. And as a company, sort of late last year, we invested quite heavily in actually educating everyone in the business about what compassion is. And we've found that to be quite a game changer for us, not only in awareness, but actually output and people working together. So it's been a really good model for us.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. And I love, I hear from each of you this notion of being courageous and vulnerable, right? Both are important, both are necessary for compassion. It takes both of those things. So that's great. Thank you. So I've worked with all of you for a number of years now, and I've seen your leadership evolve over the years. So I'm really interested to hear from you on why compassion is or has become an important part of your personal leadership growth and development. So why include it? Why speak about that over the years for you?
It's interesting. Only recently we did a big rebrand of our business, and we looked at our core values and our 3 core values which we operate, and we approach everything we do through the lens of passion, excellence, and trust, and that really drives everything that we do. And looking at the value of trust, one of the best ways to get trust among people is to make those deeper connections and to have those authentic discussions. So the ability to ensure that you can what builds trust and what breaks trust, people, and boundaries. Developing boundaries also was a very big part of onboarding new people, and providing boundaries for people is a compassionate approach to leadership, because without boundaries, people don't know what they can do or what they can't do. There's grey areas, and that can just build a downward spiral. So there were a number of reasons that compassion really was a big part of the way that I wanted to engage with our staff members and lead our staff members, but particularly building trust, providing boundaries. And then when those deeper connections are built, it creates a fun and enjoyable workplace. The laughter in our office is fantastic, and to see the difference between when you've been in workplaces that perhaps don't have those values and approach. It's just polar opposites. So, and I've been in those situations, and I've seen them, and I don't want to go back to them. And I've seen how compassion can really grow and build a business and create a real buzz. and it's a wonderful environment to be in. So yeah, once you've experienced compassion in leadership and the benefits it brings, yeah, there's no turning back.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I really hear the connection between, compassion is about alleviating the suffering. So the flip side, when that suffering and struggle and stress can be reduced, there's more space and opportunity for fun and connection and enjoyment in what we do. And when you spend that many hours at work, most of us, we should be enjoying it, I hope, So yeah, thanks, Craig.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, I mean, as leaders, we can rely a lot on mentors giving us feedback. But I think the really rich feedback comes from the people that we lead. And it's that ability to hold the mirror up and actually look at ourselves through the eyes of our people. I always think about that saying, you wouldn't like me when I'm angry. But you would, when you're in a situation with, when I've been in a situation with previous leaders, and you know that you're going to get a fierce reaction by giving them some news, it stops you from wanting to engage. That trust, you feel fearful. And I think what it's about is really trying to look at yourself through those eyes and really ask yourself the question, would I want to approach me in a situation? And I think it's really about turning the dial, not just putting your best foot forward for your mentor, but actually replaying that and understanding from the people that we lead how we are received and perceived, and really paying attention to that, because it's having that growth mindset and accepting that all of us are imperfect and we're all learning. Even now, as leaders, as we progress on our leadership journey, we're still learning new things. And that compassion really needs to come through because we can very quickly fall back into old habits. And it's keeping that check-in with yourself to make sure that you are still remaining authentic to those values.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a great point that Leanne makes about being self-aware at the end of the day, because who we are as people is the way we lead. And if you're self-aware and recognise that perhaps in a situation you've armoured up or you've put up barriers, we can if we recognise that and reflect and then grow from that, then that's a great thing. So yeah, I think being self-aware is certainly a big part of wanting to become a compassionate leader.
Yeah, fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, I think the journey was similar for me. I think I came to a realization about 18 months ago that, I'd spent a lot of time in the leadership skill development, technical skill development, those sorts of contemporary leadership concepts, but I was just really missing something in terms of the inner work. And I spend a lot of time up here and not connecting here. So I could sort of see that we were reaching a point in the business where I would often talk about expectation and be living up here, but I really wanted to support the person, but I wasn't really conveying that. So I think for me, I sort of just reached a point where I needed to learn a lot more about that inner compassion and mindfulness and those sorts of things, and bring that into the business and sort of help others get to that stage as well. So I think, yeah, that's a really important part of my growth.
Yeah, fantastic. And I really hear from each of you and what you're saying around that self-awareness and this, hearing this thread of really needing to bring our humanness into our leadership, that compassion actually helps connect us with that humanness, that spirit of humanity that is who we all are. So I really hear that in each of the comments that you've just shared. So it's fantastic. So my next question, we know that in the work that we do, compassion is a kind of a hot topic around the world. It's even in the last couple of years through COVID, it's become even much more talked about, and there's more inquiry around it, especially with COVID. And at the same time, we also, in our experience, come across many people and organizations that still kind of see it as a nice to have in a business context, maybe. So I'm really interested in how has compassionate leadership helped your teams and or your organizations, maybe their bottom line or their output or their excellence or effectiveness or, innovation is in the work that you do? How has it helped the business,
I've seen some really significant changes in our business. And across a whole range of areas. We've had staff members who have really opened up to us because of the approach that we take and creating those strong, authentic connections, who have highlighted where they want to go with their career, understanding what floats their boat and what doesn't. and using that as our business has changed over time and pivoted, how we've been able to massage them into roles which we know that they really aspire to do and makes their heart sing. So when we have staff who can transition into those roles and have positions that they're really enjoying, of course, that's going to increase and develop productivity in the business. So that's been one area and we've had a few people who've transitioned into different roles as a result of that. And similarly, and I mentioned that the fun workplace. I've really seen the benefits of that, because when people are happy doing their role, clearly that brings a really good vibe to the business and the office. So that's certainly, while it's not a bottom line component, it certainly is a big part of the business and people wanting to work for us, as opposed to when we've gone out to market and our business has grown particularly over the last 3 years. We've seen people who have come to our interviews who really know our business and really align with our values, because we've been very forward in putting them out there and seeing people who really want to work with us. So that just gives us a great choice of employees. So yeah, it's helped us across a number of areas. And our bottom line, I suppose if you look at it from a financial point of view, the last 3 years have been our best years, year on year. So whether that, and we introduced the kind of compassion in leadership approach for our directors probably about 3 years ago. So whether you can join the dots on that. So it's certainly been a very big part of seeing our business become just a better place.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Craig.
I've always had an open door policy, which is a little bit hard when you're at home. So, and with most of our organisation working from home over the last couple of years, it's been incredibly important to make sure that you have an open Teams policy. I have regular one-to-ones, I have skip level reviews, I pop into stand-ups of teams. I tell jokes, I demonstrate that I'm human, and always encourage people to reach out to me one-to-one and engage with teams and chat channels by making sure that people understand that I'm still that fun person, but I'm also can be a serious manager as well that you can come to with a problem. So my door is open, even if it's a virtual door, and making sure that, when you do hear that there are individuals out there who might need a check-in, because during lockdowns, there's a lot of people who've been confined to their bedroom 24/7 for 2 weeks, and particularly in a share house where they've not necessarily had the chance to get out. And it's important as leaders that we do check in, that we do reach out, even if it's just a little Teams channel chat, just to say, hey, how are you going? I hope everything's okay. I think that's incredibly important to maintain those connections and stay in touch when you can't physically be in the same room or in the same building as your people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's still ways to connect, isn't there? And
more ways now than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Beck. Clinton?
Yeah, look, similar to the others and many businesses, I guess, for us, I guess we saw the great disconnection and working from home emerge around 2 years ago. And really the whole momentum of everything in the company really started to slow down. You started to see a lot more conflict, and you started to see, people really being impacted by it. So I think, using the lever of compassion and more broadly socially conscious leadership, we found that to be a really good tool. And guess what? Like our business outcomes are far better than they've ever been. We're kicking more goals by being vulnerable and compassionate. Who would have thought? And it's really worked for us as a business. And I think it's been really good at keeping that connection sustained over a period of time. So, and we've seen a lot more support in peer groups, not just the traditional leader-employee relationship, but even just amongst peers. I hear a lot of stories about people having little accountability partners and support partners and those sorts of things within the business. So it's really good to see some of those things come to life.
Yeah, great. What I really hear is this idea of this sustained support. So how do we take the support, the compassion, the care for our people as well, and sustain that? And today, with all the complexity and change that we face at such a high, fast-paced, degree, that sustained support, I think, is really important. And what I'm hearing is that compassion actually is a tool to help us do that, which does have a direct impact to that bottom line or the outcomes of our business and for our customers. So that's fantastic. So if that's the benefit and the business case, I guess, for compassion, in your experience, what are some of the things that get in the way of bringing compassion in leadership and business? What are some of the barriers? What have you found? Because it's easy to talk about how great it is, but I think we also need to look at and what makes it a bit challenging at times, aside from needing to be courageous and vulnerable, which we've already talked about. What else gets in the way? What are some of the barriers to bringing that compassion in your work?
I think
I'd say, oh, sorry, Craig, you go.
I was just going to say, I think Gwen, you hit the nail on the head when you said, fear of being vulnerable and lack of courage. It's very easy to shy away from those hard conversations, and similarly, and we've probably all done it before and seen what happens when that occurs. But similarly, a fear of being vulnerable and opening up is a big part of that. But I also think, and we touched on it before, is lack of self-awareness. So, there's a need to be self-aware and recognise our thoughts and emotions and how we show up and self-protect at times. And when we recognise that's when we reflect on situations where perhaps we've done that, having self-compassion and knowing yourself really matters. Put simply, who we are and as people is how we lead, and so having that self-awareness, or perhaps, as you say, a barrier that might get in the way is not having that self-awareness to know that you just walk away from a situation and blame others, and that can be a barrier to compassion.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think we get in our own way as leaders sometimes. We think that there's an expectation from us to have the answers, to be the one that has to be strong, to be that courageous leader. And sometimes having that can lead to a bit of a fixed mindset around what we are capable of doing. And it's really checking in with ourselves and making sure that we understand that it's not up to us to have the answers. A lot of the times our people have the answers, and it's about asking the right questions and getting out of your own way and letting your people actually build on what they're doing. And when you share your vulnerabilities and demonstrate that you are in a situation where you don't have to have the answers, that's really, really, really powerful. But a lot of times as leaders, we think that's weakness. And it's actually not. I think that's actually a true strength, to demonstrate that you are open to people to guide you on the journey.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Beck.
I think also, Gwen, not having a strong connection with staff members can be a big barrier to compassion in leadership. And you're not always going to have strong connections with people, and that's that's not a failure. It's just the way of the world, unfortunately, with some people. So whether you try and form that connection through various means, or perhaps there's another leader who needs to be involved. It's not a failure. It's just working through the process to ensure that staff member has a leader who can be compassionate.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Craig.
Ego. Did I say ego?
Yeah.
I think it was.
I'm glad you brought that in. Yeah.
Reinventing Organisations had this illustration of an ego in the hand, and every time I see it come out in someone, I picture their ego in a hand each time. I think that can really be a strong barrier, but respect, and I think respect must be hand in hand with compassion. I've seen some leaders not demonstrate the importance of discretion, and that can really be a setback for compassion across the business. You lose that trust, and it's very hard to get that back.
Yeah, absolutely. And how often, we spend so much of our life building our ego up as part of our journey. And then we get to a point where we may need to break it down a little bit so that we can tap into these different competencies and skills. Now, I did say to the panelists earlier that I wouldn't throw in any additional questions and try and catch them off guard. And we've had a question from one of our participants. So I'd love to share that and put it to the panelists if anyone would like to answer this question. Marilyn has asked, how have each of you been able to use compassion as a tool in your own lives? So again, how have each of you been able to use compassion as a tool in your own lives?
I can take that one. I think for myself, it's too hard to be two people. I can't be a person at work and a different person at home. So the person I bring to work is the person I am at home. And so the connections I make with my friends and the people that I meet and form relationships with, even casual relationships with somebody at the checkout, I bring my authentic self. I connect with the person, I use their name. And I find that just making those even casual connections with people, looking a person in the eye, actually pays back so much more to you and fills your cup, because you're demonstrating to somebody who doesn't really matter in your life that you're a human and they're a human. And then you take that into your friendships and the relationships that you build within your social networks. And you can have really, really deep and meaningful connections and those trustworthy conversations, and have some really, really deep and meaningful discussions about some really tricky subjects. And they also help hold the mirror up to you as well, so that you can see yourself reflected in their eyes and get that authentic feedback as well. I find that having that richness and authenticity through everything I do helps me stay true and have that humility in those engagements as well, leaving the ego aside and recognizing that you are no better than anybody else that you are working with or talking to. We are all people. We all have our own experiences. And I think that provides a richness in those interactions as well.
Yeah, thanks, Beck.
Yeah, I agree with Beck. There's certainly no distinction as far as I see between you at work and you outside of work. While that people talk about a business coach, it's as much as having a life coach, because all those learnings really get taken and introduced into everything that you do. It's not just while it works in a work environment. Similarly, it works just as well in a family or outside of work environment. I know being vulnerable and having difficult conversations with family, which I may not have had in the past, but I've had now, have made things immensely better as a result of that, where I may have shied away from that in the past. So certainly once you learn something which may have a business focus and introduce it into your life, it certainly is better outcomes across everything you do.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Craig. Clinton, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. Like I have a 16-month-old daughter, and for someone with developing communication skills, applying compassion in that situation is really interesting. How do you do that? How do you kind of relate and share and listen where she can't really communicate that effectively at the moment? So that's been an interesting exercise, but I feel like it's the same process. You connect with your heart and you try to understand it from what her view of the world is. So I think there's definitely no barrier between work and home. I completely concur with the other panelists.
Yeah. And I think what I'm hearing from each of you is, the compassion as a tool, based on the question that was just asked. What I hear in your comments is that you leverage compassion, and it seems to almost open up another way of being and different choices and different actions for you, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, in your personal life, in your interactions. So, that's actually what I'm hearing, is that compassion as a tool to leverage maybe a different way of being or a different way of approaching different things and how you show up. So yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for the question, Marilyn. And in closing, we're getting closer to the end of our discussion today. I'm really interested in any advice or wisdom. We know that wisdom is something that is correlated with compassion and the importance of bringing wisdom into our work, not just experience. So what advice or wisdom do you have for others that are listening to this discussion today for, maybe they're wanting to grow their compassion in themselves and or in their organization or team? So what would you share from your learnings and the insights you've had in your journeys?
From my point of view, leading with compassion, I see it as solving a lot of, or many of the fundamental kind of human HR, human relation issues that managers face across, and I've seen it in a lot of different circumstances. But when I reflect on situations I've been in which have had, where there's been little compassion in leadership and the issues that have kind of manifested as a result of it, and when I reflect on those and see what the fundamental issues were, I recognise that having compassion in those situations, having boundaries, having authentic discussions, having all the tools that we use as compassionate leaders would have simply solved them, when unfortunately there's been a spiral which continues and it just makes things worse. So yeah, it really is a great, nearly cure-all in terms of issues that leaders face with staff members.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is that self-awareness and humility that goes along with it. Over the 20, 30 years, 40 years of your career, we can often anchor ourselves and think we're here at this point. We forget to look backwards and see our journey and recognize that on that journey, we've all learned, we've all made mistakes, we've all had to pivot and do things differently. So I would encourage that people to really take a step back from themselves and look at themselves and ask the questions: would I approach me? Would I work for me? Would I like me as a leader? And if you can't honestly answer those questions and say yes, then that's a real moment in self-awareness, because ultimately your responsibility as a leader of people is to really unleash their potential and lead those people. Be approachable, be compassionate, be humble, accept that failure is a first attempt in learning. My favorite acronym.
Yeah, love that.
And we encourage children to fail forward and to learn and to make mistakes, because that's where resilience is, that's where growth is. And then quite often we can change those expectations of our people and of ourselves and really have that fixed mindset. But it's about that growth mindset. We are all learning every day. And some of the best lessons can come from the younger generation of today. They're so different from where we were when we were starting out in our career. And we need to learn from them, learn how to get the best out of them. And oftentimes that means completely changing the way that we work and being accepting that we need to change. That can be one of the most difficult lessons, to accept that we're not perfect and we are the ones that actually need to change. And it's having that view and recognition that I think is really powerful for growth in leadership.
Yeah, great. And then I think also on top of that, knowing that we don't have to do that growth and learning alone either, right?
Absolutely
that there are
not.
others out there that you can tap into, this cohort, for example. I know how much you all have support and how critical that is. So yeah, that's great. Thanks, Beck.
Yeah, for me, I think there's three things. And I think the first one is to invite yourself to practice self-compassion first. I think coming from that basis is a really strong foundation. And, compassion isn't a transaction. You're not ticking a box. You've really got to really learn the art of being bespoke in each situation or group. And, being able to have excellent judgment and being able to read that situation is so key.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Clinton. Clinton, we actually have someone, a participant who's directed a question at you, if I can ask it.
Okay. Sure.
Olivia said, Clinton, you mentioned that you were a mental health safety officer. Can you say a little bit more about this, please?
So, yeah, for some of you, I don't know if you remember, but there was always sort of a first aid sort of officer when you go and do the course with St. John's, I think it was. But there's also another one that's now run officially for mental health first aid. So you get, I guess, accredited as a mental health first aider in the business, and we have them at different layers in the business. And really, that's about being there for people ad hoc. They might just give you a call at Teams and reach out and just sort of seeking some support. So I've actually been called on quite a few times with it, particularly during the pandemic. A lot of the time, there would be members of our staff just really overwhelmed by the situation with their family at home and just found it too much. And just needed to be talked off the cliff in that moment. So it just sort of equips you with an awareness of all the types of different mental illnesses that people may have, or symptoms that people may be experiencing, and how to help them through that. A lot of it's sort of referring to outside services, but I tend to try and help the person myself where I can, where possible.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, you touched on, there's so much in a workplace context and in life where emotions are going to come up, and we are emotional beings, whether we like it or not, and we're wired for connection. And so when we go through challenges and complexity, as we have for sure over the last few years, but even prior to that, and will be going forward, the need and the importance of connecting with people from that place of emotion and acknowledging that and giving that space for that to, again, with compassion, alleviate and reduce the suffering and the struggle and the stress, so that when the struggle and the suffering is out of the way, we have more capacity to be fully ourselves and to really do the great things that we're here to do. So thank you. It's been fantastic to be here with you. And I know in Australia, it's Friday morning, and around the world, it's probably other times. So many of you have to get off to work. So we'll wrap this up. I want to express my deepest gratitude to Clinton and Beck and Craig for joining us this morning, for taking the time out and sharing your insights with people. I know from my experience working with all of you, I'm continuously impressed by who you are, who you show up as, and how you leverage compassion into the way you work and achieve your outcomes and align it with success. So it's been a real great honor to do this and have this conversation and really to share hopefully some insights. If people just get at least one takeaway from this, then it's a real success and a benefit. So on behalf of the Australian Compassion Council and the Global Charter for Compassion, just want to say thank you. And from Tasmania, Australia, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Gwen.